So, hello there, and welcome back to yet another Night of the Movies podcast. I'm Spike Knight, and in these podcasts, I like talking all things movies and TV, and whatever I want, whenever I want. And in today's podcast, I'm reviewing The Fall Guy. So, let's get into it, shall we? The Fall Guy is this new comedy, romance, action movie blockbuster starring Ryan Gosling, Emily Blunt, and Taylor Johnson, who's rumoured to be the next Bond, Winston Duke, and Hannah Waddingham. And the film is directed by David Leitch, who is best known for directing the likes of Deadpool 2, Atomic Blonde, and by the way, Deadpool 2, I didn't really like at all. Atomic Blonde I liked, but I thought could have been better. He also directed Hobbs and Shaw, which I haven't seen. He co-directed the first John Wick film, which I saw once a long time ago, wasn't really for me. And most recently, he directed Bullet Train, which I thought was fine. I think I reviewed that on this channel. I thought it was a fine movie, but it felt like it was a wannabe Tarantino film, and that film should have been wildly entertaining. But it wasn't. It should have been so much better. Anyway, I was interested in seeing this film. I was interested in seeing David Leitch's new film, The Fall Guy, because it's been receiving a lot of positive buzz ever since it first premiered at South by Southwest Film Festival in America. People have been saying, oh, it's going to bring back that, the romantic action movies from the 80s and the 90s that have seemed to disappear now, but this film's going to bring them back, you know what I mean? And the people were saying, oh, it's going to be the feel-good movie of the summer, and it's going to get everybody back into the cinema. And I was like, wow, I didn't expect that from the trailers, because I thought the trailers for this film looked okay. I didn't think they looked bad, but I also kind of felt that I've also kind of had trailer fatigue with this movie because of the amount of times I've seen the trailer for it at the cinema since January, since I've been going to the cinema in 2024. I keep seeing the trailer for this, with You Give Love a Bad Name by Bon Jovi. Yes, Bon Jovi. I don't know why I almost forgot the artist's name. Yeah, anyway, when you hear the song in the trailer, You Give Love a Bad Name, and you see Ryan Gosling and Emily Blunt, and then, there's some fling happening between them two in the trailer, and there's a stunt where Ryan Gosling is jumping out of the car and onto this helicopter, it looks like, in the trailer. Anyway, I've seen the trailers for this film so many times at cinema that the last time I saw it, I really began to hate the trailer. Because the first time I saw the trailer, I was like, oh, this looks like it's going to be a fun movie. This last time I saw the trailer at the cinema, which was about a week or two ago now, I literally wanted to claw my eyes out because I'd seen the trailer so many flipping times. This is one of those trailers they were forcing down my throat at the cinema. But I thought the trailer looked okay, and I was hearing lots of positive things about it. Apparently Spielberg was a fan of the film. He went up to Ryan Gosling at one of the awards dinners that were happening for around the Oscar season this year. He went up to Ryan Gosling talking about how much he really enjoyed his performance in the film. So there was a lot of people which were talking about how much this film was a really good, fun time at the cinema. That's what I was hoping to get when I went to go and watch the film at the cinema yesterday. And the Google plot synopsis for The Fall Guy goes as follows. After leaving the business 1 year earlier, battle-scarred stuntman Colt Seavers, played by Ryan Gosling in the film, springs back into action when the star of a big studio movie suddenly disappears. As the mystery surrounding this missing actor deepens, Colt soon finds himself ensnared in a sinister plot that pushes him to the edge of a fall more dangerous than any stunt. And honestly, I thought this movie was alright. It was fine. It wasn't a bad watch. I enjoyed parts of it. It had some funny moments, mainly because of the actors involved. I enjoyed watching these actors involved because I like these actors for the most part. I'm beginning to be a huge fan of Ryan Gosling, particularly after I saw him as Ken in Barbie, and he's channeling some of his Ken-ergy, if you will, in this film. He's also channeling some of his performance in Nice Guys, which I think is a very underrated comedy, and he's very good in that, and he's channeling some of his Nice Guys performance into this film. Emily Blunt is fun to watch, although slightly miscast, and I'll talk about that in more detail later on in this review. Hannah Waddingham is also fun to watch, and I've liked Hannah Waddingham ever since I saw in Game of Thrones, in which she played a very different character than she did in Ted Lasso, but I also liked her a lot in Ted Lasso, in which she won 2 Emmys for her performance. Or was it just 1 Emmy? No, she just won 1 Emmy for her performance in Ted Lasso, but she's so much fun in that series, and she's great in this film, although she was clearly wearing a wig, which kind of bothered me. But she was, she's fun to watch in the film, and the film has some good action set pieces. It was fine to pass the time. There was nothing that was terrible about it. It's just fine. That's the problem, though. There's nothing that great about it either. I was going into this film really hoping to have a blast with it and just have a really good time. I wasn't going into this film expecting to see the best movie of the year so far. I was just going into this film thinking I was going to have a similar experience watching this as I did watching Ghostbusters Frozen Empire in the year. Watch a film that's not particularly great, but it's fun to watch at the same time. So people who might be sitting there right now listening or watching this review going, oh, well, you just don't like fun movies. No, I enjoyed Ghostbusters Frozen Empire earlier this year, and that's not a brilliant film by any means, but it was a fun movie in my opinion. And I didn't find this film that fun. The pacing is a little all over the place. It feels like a David Leitch film, and I don't mean that in a good way, because the thing about David Leitch movies is none of them have been great. None of them that I've seen, and I've seen all of his movies, granted, but none of his movies that I've seen, and I've seen the majority of his films, have been particularly brilliant. Deadpool 2, I think, is terrible. I remember watching that film in the cinema, and I couldn't wait to leave. And I wasn't the biggest fan of the first Deadpool, so, take my opinion with a grain of salt there. But Deadpool 2, I thought was, almost watchable, and I haven't seen that film since I saw it in the cinema in 2018. What other films did he direct? Atomic Blonde I liked, but it could have been so much better. John Wick I don't remember much about, I've got to admit, and that's probably an unpopular opinion, but whatever, it's my opinion. And Bullet Train, which I watched a couple of years ago, that had the potential to be brilliant, but it was just fine. Like I already mentioned, it was a wannabe Tarantino movie, and it should have been bonkers and wildly entertaining like this film, but it wasn't. This film, every single time, and this is a thing about David Leitch movies, a thing about action in all of his movies, every time an action set piece happens in one of his films, it's like him as a director and the filmmakers behind the movie, the people who are trying to make this action set piece work, going, wow, look at the action, look what we're doing, oh, look how fantastic it is. We're even going to slow down the action a little bit to show you how much effort we put into it and how cool we think it looks. And I'm like, oh, you don't do this though. Don't make your actions so showy. Personally, I don't like action that's showy. Some of my favourite action movies are where the action's just quick, to the point. It's not all showy, but then when you actually think about the action after you watch the movie, like, God, how did they make that work? Those are some, my favourite action movies is where there's action like that. Not action which feels like the filmmakers behind the camera going, look what we're doing with the action, people, we're going to slow it down because there's a proper cool action sequence. A lot of work into the sequence, so we're really going to show it off. I don't like that type of action in my movies, and this film's got a lot of that action. The big stunt that's been shown in the trailers, shown to death in the trailers of Ryan Gosling jumping out of the car and onto the helicopter, is so showy in the film. It was showy in the trailer, but it's even showier, I don't know if it's a word, but it's even showier in the movie. And I'm watching it going, oh God, also, that's the big stunt at the end of the movie. That's the big action set piece that the entire movie's been leading up to, and they've flipping spoiled it in the trailers. And the problem is, the big problem with this movie, and I can't believe I mentioned it yet, but it's because my head's all over the place as I went swimming earlier today, and I've spoken about this in past vlogs, side on here. Past vlogs, what am I saying? I've spoken about this in past podcasts on this channel when I go swimming. It just affects the way I think throughout the rest of the day, so that's why I'm a bit all over the place right now. And I forgot to mention the biggest problem with this movie, but the biggest problem with this film is that it wants to recapture that energy and It wants to be a 90s action blockbuster. It wants to be Con Air, or True Lies, or Terminator 2. Well, I'll put another one down here. Face Off. It wants to be one of those 90s action blockbusters that I've just mentioned, or one of the other plethora of 90s action blockbusters I haven't mentioned. You know, those type of action blockbusters where the action is really over the top, and there's all these famous actors in these movies, you know, in the likes of Con Air, True Lies, Face Off, and Terminator 2. I'm not saying these movies are bad, by the way, but in those movies we just mentioned, you get all these famous actors, and they're doing these really over-the-top performances, and there's all this action which is, well, it's big budget with a capital B, you know, the action sequences are overcooked and are really over the top, and it is like the directors of those movies are going, look, we're doing these big action set pieces, and there's normally a love story at the centre of these action movies that I'm talking about, whether it's True Lies, or whether it's Con Air, or whether it's Face Off. There's normally a love story at the centre of these action blockbusters, the centre of these 90s action blockbusters, but that's normally put in the background, that's normally forgotten about, because actually the film wants to focus more on the action, and that's what this film felt like it was trying to do. It felt like it was trying to be the next Face Off, or the next Con Air, or the next True Lies. I mean, I don't actually think this film is that similar to True Lies, Face Off, or Con Air, but it feels like it's trying to capture that same energy and that same 90s feel of those 90s action blockbusters, you know what I mean? That Jerry Bruckheimer action feel where it's like, yeah, we're doing a Jerry Bruckheimer produced action blockbuster. There's a love story that doesn't really work at the centre of it. There's all these over-the-top action sequences. There's these famous actors like in Con Air, you got Nicolas Cage, and you've got Steve Buscemi, and there's all these, and John Cusack. In Face Off, you got John Travolta and Nicolas Cage again. In, what's the other one that I mentioned? True Lies, you got Arnold Schwarzenegger and Jamie Lee Curtis, and look at them, they're doing all these cool action sequences, and there's love story, and there's, you know, there's things which are cool to watch, but also the thing is about those 90s action blockbusters is they're not great movies, in my opinion. Out of the ones I've watched, and I've seen a fair amount of 90s action blockbusters, you know, which I just haven't mentioned, obviously, but I've seen a fair amount of 90s action blockbusters that aren't great, and overstay their welcome, and they're fine watches, they're fun to watch, and they pass the time and everything like that, but I don't have a great fondness for them. Although, I still, I watched Con Air for the first time a good couple of months ago now, and I kind of enjoyed it because it was a product of its time. It was a 90s action blockbuster, and that's what it felt like. It felt like a movie out of the 90s, you know, for better and for worse, but I didn't mind watching it. But the problem is, the Fall Guy feels like it's trying to capture what made those 90s action blockbusters watchable on like a Friday or a Saturday night. But times have changed. And this movie was made in 2024. Well, actually, it was probably made in 2023, but it's released in 2024. And for better or for worse, whether you like it or not, movies are not the same as they were in the 90s, and trying to recapture that feeling of a 90s action blockbuster you'd watch on a Friday or Saturday night with a couple of mates where you all order takeout or something like that, it's not going to happen. And it feels like it's trying to, at least it felt to me like it was trying to capture that same feeling of a 90s blockbuster, but trying to do it in the 2020s, and I don't think it really succeeded because this isn't the 90s anymore. It felt like it was trying to capture the craziness in the action that those 90s action blockbusters had, like Face Off or Con Air or True Lies, but the action isn't that crazy because times have changed, and I think this film is trying to be a love letter to action cinema that has had its day. I think there's a reason this film bombed at the box office, because people don't really like these sort of movies to be made nowadays, because people know it's not going to capture that same energy that the action blockbuster of the 90s had. And there's a love story at the centre of it, which doesn't really work. Like many of the action blockbusters of the 90s, whether it's Face Off, True Lies, what was the other one that I kept mentioning, Con Air. There's plenty of other examples, of course, but those are the 3 examples I've been focusing on for this review. And there's a love story at the centre of this movie, very much like the love story at the centre of Con Air, Face Off and True Lies, which you don't totally believe in, but the film keeps trying to convince you that the love story is actually very believable and that you want these 2 characters to get together. But the problem is, the love story in this film, it's not much of a love story. The characters break up, and not to go into too many details, but they basically get together about half an hour later, and the film's about 2 hours though, and I'm thinking, but what's the point? I know these 2 characters are going to get together. There's no sort of stakes to think that they won't get back together, because they clearly still like each other. And I felt that the romance that this film was trying to pride itself on, I felt that the romance that this film was trying to sell itself on in the trailers and in the marketing, wasn't that much of a romance. I didn't really like watching it because I didn't really believe in it, and I didn't really care about it, and it felt like the film was trying to make me care, but it was failing doing so because I didn't feel there was much chemistry between the main 2 stars. I like Ryan Gosling and Emily Blunt quite a lot. I think they are terrific actors, and Ryan Gosling, I think, comes out of this film the best. But Emily Blunt, I didn't feel was great. I think Emily Blunt is one of the best actresses working in the business today. I truly do. But I felt she was miscast because it felt like she was taking it a little too seriously, and she didn't really know what the tone of the film was and how to... I'm not really sure if her character properly fit in the film. I felt her character was... out of place at times. And Winston Duke, I did not think gave off a great performance. And Hannah Waddingham was fun to watch, but I've already spoken about this. I couldn't get over the fact she was clearly wearing a wig. I was like, you're clearly Hannah Waddingham wearing a wig when I was watching the film. Just, it annoyed me that. It did feel like I was watching caricatures of these stars playing these characters. It felt like I was watching the actors rather than the characters they were playing. I never for once felt like I was watching Colt, that's a character's name that Ryan Gosling was playing. I never once felt like I was watching Jodie, that's a character's name that Emily Blunt plays. You know, I never for once felt like I was watching the characters. I almost always throughout the movie felt like I was watching the actors, and to a degree that sort of worked. But also, it made everything less believable, and it made everything feel a little goofy and over the top, and I didn't want this film to feel over the top. You know, I wanted to feel more grounded in the love story, but because everything else is over the top, the love story is unbelievable. Because the whole film is unbelievable. The central love story is unbelievable, and Aaron Taylor-Johnson, that's another actor who's in this film that I haven't mentioned, I'm not really sure what he was going for, because the tone of this film is all over the place, which means a lot of the performances in the film are all over the place, and plus the pacing in the film is all over the place. You know, this film wanted to be this action, comedy, romance, blockbuster, and it doesn't really have much romance, and it doesn't really have much comedy. I didn't find the film to be funny because a lot of the jokes were incredibly predictable. I could see the jokes coming from a mile away. It didn't help that I was watching this in a cinema full of people. Well, it was about, I don't know, just over 3/4 of the way full, and nobody was laughing at any of the jokes. If you were laughing, you fell out of place, as I did in a couple of moments. And I did find, I found the smallest section of this film funny, mainly because of the actors involved. There was a couple of jokes that I laughed at, but so much of the comedy doesn't work because you can see where the jokes are coming from a mile away. It's like, there's a joke incoming, and here's the joke. and here's the destination. And the actors pause after they deliver a quote-unquote comedic line, a quote-unquote joke in the film, and I really hate when they do that. My favourite comedies is when the jokes just keep coming and there's no pauses for the audience to laugh after the joke. In so many comedy movies nowadays, or so many movies that have comedy in them, it feels like the actors pause after saying a joke because they think they're going to get a laugh in the cinema. I'm like, for God's sakes, move on, because if the joke's not funny, this comes across as an awkward pause, and guess what? A lot of the jokes in this film ain't funny, so we get a lot of awkward pauses. Plus, the secret of comedy is 1, 2, 3. Timing! That's a secret of comedy, and this film doesn't really understand that because the pacing is all over the place. There's some slow moments, and there's some fast moments, and you get an action sequence, and then you get some moments which are trying to be funny, but like I said, the pacing is completely all over the place, which means some of the timing with the jokes is all over the place. I'm watching this, and I want to laugh. I want to be having such a blast. I want to be believing in the romance. I want to be shipping, as many people say. I want to be shipping Emily Blunt and Ryan Gosling in this film. But I'm just not. And I'm not really going along with it because nothing in the film is that good. It's a fine watch. It's fun to watch. It's enjoyable in times. I'm not saying this is a terrible movie whatsoever because I didn't have a terrible time watching it. I didn't come out of the film going, well, that was a complete waste of time. I didn't come out of the film feeling like that, but I also felt if I saw that on streaming, yeah, it may be more worthwhile, I understand that this film wants to be a love letter to stunt work in cinema. But I didn't really feel that either. I felt a lot of the film just... It should have been a lot better. It's the same way I feel about a lot of David Leitch's movies. They're not... And none of them are really... Actually, not Deadpool 2. Deadpool 2 is terrible. But none of his movies are unwatchable. But none of them are great. And some of them really should be. Bullet Train should have been, bonkers good. And this movie should have been the feel-good movie of the summer. But it's not. And I really... I came out of this film feeling like you had the potential to do something that was so feel-good, that was such a crowd pleaser, that was so delightful, that was so wonderful, that was such a blast. And you didn't quite hit it, though. In fact, you missed it by quite a bit. It's forgettable entertainment. That's exactly what it is. And I really wish it was better. And again, it's not terrible, but for me it didn't work. And if it worked for you, that's awesome. I don't want to take it that way from you whatsoever. But for me, it felt more like a modern take on a 90s action blockbuster. But we're not in the 90s anymore. And the romance didn't work for me, the comedy didn't work for me, and the action was too shy for my liking. And so, all in all, I'm going to say that The Fall Guy, I'm going to say it's I'm going to give it a 5 out of 10. It sounds like a mean rating, but in the end, I give films a 5 out of 10 that I just think are fine, and this film is fine. Again, it had enjoyable parts. It's not terrible, and I think it helps you have charismatic leads, and you've got some great needle drops in there from songs like I Was Made for Loving You Baby by Kiss. You also have I Believe in a Thing Called Love, just listen to the rhythm of my heart. What's it? I Believe in a Thing Called Love, that's what it's called. Play by The Darkness. You've got some really great needle drops in there, and it's perfectly fine, but I was hoping to come out of this movie going, well, that has already set me on the road for great summer blockbusters this year. You know what I mean? But I didn't come out of the cinema feeling that. I came out of the cinema feeling like, if a lot of the summer blockbusters this year are going to be like this, I'm not sure if I'm going to be into them personally. I wanted it to be so good. And again, if you like it, I'm so jealous of you. I'm not trying to take that away from you whatsoever. And I'm not trying to yuck on anyone's yum, because I'm not that kind of reviewer. At least I think I'm not. But, God, this should have been better. Should have been a lot better. Not romantic enough. It's not funny enough. The action is too showy. The pacing is all over the place. The tone is all over the place. The performances all felt like caricatures. They all felt way too over the top. And none of them felt really genuine. Like, it did feel in parts like Emily Blunt and Ryan Gosling took on the roles in this movie because they got a holiday in Australia, because that's where the film is set. It did feel like they did this movie for a holiday in Australia and for the paycheck, which, you know, you don't really want from performances in the movie. And it feels like an attempt at trying to make a modern day version of a 90s blockbuster. But we're not in the 90s anymore. We're in the 2020s. Whether you like it or not, we're in the 2020s. And action movies are different. They're not like they used to be in the 90s. This film wants to capture that, and I think it fails because of that. Not awful, but nowhere near as good as it really should be. But hey, that's David Leitch for you as the director. And so, all in all, as what he said, I was going to say once more, in this review today, The Fall Guy is a 5 out of 10 from me. Anyway guys, that's it for today's podcast. If you have seen The Fall Guy, please let me know your thoughts on it in the comment section below. Maybe you absolutely loved the film, and if you did, that's great. I'm dead jealous. And if you did as well, please let me know in the comment section below, or maybe you felt similar to me. Whatever your thoughts are, please let me know in the comment section below. And as always, thank you for watching or listening to this podcast. And if you did listen to this podcast on Spotify, thank you very much. You should also know that you can check this podcast out visually. Yes, you can watch this podcast on my YouTube channel at 9 to the Movies on that platform. And if you did watch this podcast on YouTube, thank you to my viewers. And you should also know you can check out this podcast audibly on Spotify at 9 to the Movies on that platform as well. And wherever you did watch or listen to this podcast, don't forget to like and subscribe if you enjoyed my review of The Fall Guy. And look forward to much more content coming in the near distant future on this channel. As what he said, thank you so much for watching or listening to this podcast, and I suppose this is it. So I will see you guys again soon, but bye for now. Bye.